Welcome back to Fast Money. The most well-known names in crypto will descend upon New York City next week for a giant event that's got crypto investors giddy with excitement. Seema Modi's at the Crypto Desk to tell us what to expect. Seema.
Melissa, it's the biggest cryptocurrency conference in the world, and experts say, judging by history, the event will be market moving. The conference is called Consensus, and attendance has increased exponentially over the last few years. 1,500 attendees in 2016, which nearly doubled in 2017. This year, over 8,000 are expected to attend, with 50% of attendees coming from outside the U.S. The growth underscores the intense interest in cryptocurrencies around the world. So what's the big deal about this conference? Well, it's the biggest names in cryptocurrency and blockchain. CoinDesk, Binance, Coinbase, Genesis Capital, among others, will provide their outlook on how the cryptocurrency ecosystem is evolving. Serious topics will be discussed, including the role of the Federal Reserve, which St. Louis Fed President James Bullard will tackle when he presents at Consensus on Monday. European Parliament member Eva Kaili will speak on regulation. U.S. Representative David Schwier will discuss governance. Investors will also be keen to hear from FedEx CEO Frederick Smith about how blockchain will potentially transform the supply chain and logistics industry. Later in the week, Twitter and Square CEO Jack Dorsey will take the stage. CNBC will be on the ground with all the highlights. Now, the conference comes amid renewed bullish calls for Bitcoin. Legendary VC investor Tim Draper told CNBC within the hour that despite recent volatility, Bitcoin is headed higher.
No one has ever hacked the Bitcoin blockchain. It is the most secure place to put your money. And so as a stored value, it's a great place to be.
Bitcoin currently trading above $9,000. Melissa, back to you.
All right, Seema, thank you. Seema Modi. Our next guest says history suggests the conference will, in fact, be the next big catalyst for Bitcoin. Let's go off the charts with Fundstrat's Robert Slimer. Robert, what are you seeing?
Great. Thanks, Melissa. So Tom Lee, Fundstrat's founder, did a little interesting study looking at how Bitcoin behaves around consensus events. So if we go back to 2015, as was pointed out before, there were 500 people at the conference. Bitcoin moved up about 23%, which is not a huge amount given how volatile cryptos are, but then it continued up into year end for about another 100% move. When we get into 2016, a bit of a smaller move around consensus, but you can see that that was a point where cryptos began to accelerate as well. There was about a 10% move here, and then it went up for another 80% or so. And then we get into 2017, really sort of a very high-profile event. Lots of people involved in crypto stock. The cryptocurrencies are moving around, very volatile. And we come into this period here, and you get a 69% move in the week that consensus is on. Pulls back a little bit, then obviously we had that big run into year end. So what are we looking at this year? Well, if you think about where the 40-week or 200-week moving average is, or 200-day moving average is, on the 40-week, Bitcoin has just pulled right back to support and is starting to turn. So we think this is an intermediate term, multi-month low, which brings us into the next picture, because in the very short term, as we discussed just a week ago, Bitcoin's had a big run. It's up almost 50% into its 200-day, and literally on Saturday, it reversed off this level and is beginning to pull back. So there's really a bull bear scenario developing where folks are arguing that it's going lower. Our view is this is a much bigger bottom that's developed. And if that's the case, this pullback is going to be relatively shallow. It's already pulling back from the 200-day. It's sitting just above the 50-day moving average. So between 8,800 and 8,200, I know that's a big range, but that's where we see support, and we think Bitcoin continues higher from here.
All right, I think Robert comes over. Rob, why don't you come on over? I have a question at the very least. I don't know about these guys here. Ryan will bring the chair in. Thank you, Ryan.
Jim, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So you know that I love Fundstrat's work, but isn't that not enough occurrences to actually draw that conclusion?
Sure, it's a look back at a few sets of... Three, fair enough. Any quant would throw it out.
I mean, you could say Mother's Day or Memorial Day or Labor Day.
But it's all the information that we have.
Right.
It's like looking at a chart of the Dow going back 100 years. You have trends in the bond market that are there's only three trends, right? Any three 35-year trends. So you have to work with the data you have. So fair enough. We only have three instances. How did Bitcoin trade around those data points? It moved higher.
Okay. So, Robert, when Melissa talks about the correlation, causation versus correlation, what other things to throw in there besides Mother's Day can we look at as far as what I'm seeing on that chart? So even though we're talking about a finite, a very small amount of data points, what's the list of things that we should watch to be bullish for Bitcoin?
Technically or fundamentally?
Fundamentally or technically, you could see. You look back at those charts. You always have an incidence of what happened on those charts.
Right, well,
so what else was taking place when those charts are moving up?
Well, there was obviously the big bull market behind it. That's one point.
Right.
But I think that right here, right now, there's a lot of people are looking for clarity on projects. Yeah. Right. So we have all this uncertainty. We've had the big bear market. There's uncertainty around regulation. I think a lot of that, or some of that, should become clearer as we move through consensus. But technically, I think what really matters, you've had this run off the bottom. Does it fail here? That's still a question mark. So our opinion, my opinion is, it's going to hold around the 50-day. You're going to shake a few people out. Some of that momentum's gotten overbought. You get down to key levels. I think it holds fairly close to where we are now. Yeah.
So let me ask you, it appears as if the volatility has diminished considerably in the last 3 or 4 months. What do you make of that?
Well, I think compared to what we saw in the first quarter?
Compared to what we saw the second half of last year, for example.
Yeah, well, has the volatility actually declined?
I mean, that's the way it just looks.
Because the bear market was pretty volatile.
It was really volatile, really bad, and now it seems to have sort of found a level and stayed there, and you have swings that don't seem to be nearly as big as they used to be.
Right. Well, my take on that is what we saw in the first quarter was all this rolling over the market. We were able to short Bitcoin, and then we had all the uncertainty around regulation. And you had the Mt. Gox issues, you had the tax issues, and all that sort of capitulated into the April low that we saw. And so the recovery has been reasonably orderly. If you look at the altcoins, whether it's Ether all the way down to some of the smaller ones, they're actually behaving reasonably well. Not all of them, but some of them are actually in pretty strong bull markets, like EOS, for example.
Right.
So I think that the regulatory risk, the fundamental risk around what's happening with cryptos has hit a bottom, and now we're in a stage of general recovery.
Rob, thank you.
Thank you.
Rob Slimer of Fundstrat. Timothy J. Seymour.
Well, I'll tell you what. So I like to trade around this GBTC, which is the Bitcoin Trust, which it trades, like a stock, and that's why I like to trade around. And frankly, I'm agnostic about whether it trades at a premium or a discount to the underlying asset. And in this case, we've talked about this on the show. It trades at a premium. I don't care. I bought it this morning. I actually agree with these guys. I think the sentiment right now continues to be on an upswing. I think you've got support at the 50, support at the 100 right here. But even if these markets break down, I do think you've got a lot of follow through.
That was the moment that I wanted to use Bitcoin.